What better way to build a fort here near the confluence of the Sacramento and American Rivers in the 1840s than to just buy another fort that existed in California? Well, that's what John Sutter did. For a little context, John Sutter arrives here in this area of the Sacramento Valley in August 1839 with a landing party of just himself, 10 Hawaiians. John Sutter went to Hawaii before coming to California, 3 sailors, and a large bulldog. He will claim this area of the Sacramento Valley as his, land that had been inhabited for thousands of years since time immemorial by the Nisenan, Miwok, and Mainu native peoples. John Sutter became a Mexican citizen and a representative of the government in this area. And as a Mexican official, he was deeded a almost 49,000 acre land grant that he will name Nueva Helvetia, which means New Switzerland, named after where he was from. His land grant he will get in June 1841. Now he wanted to build a fort, and it would become the agricultural and manufacturing center of his land grant, which would rely heavily on the labor from the local indigenous native population, especially in the building of Sutter's fort. On December 13th, 1841, John Sutter purchased Fort Ross, which was a Russian fur trapping and agricultural outpost operated by the Russian American Company. The fort was located along the California coast just north of Bodega Bay on the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Kashaya Pomo Native people. Ever since April 1839, the Russian American Company, in agreement with Czar Nicholas I, agreed to abolish the Russian fortress known as Fort Ross. The agricultural efforts and manufacturing operations at Fort Ross were no longer profitable for the company. Fort Ross, after all, was supposed to be an agricultural outpost to support the other Russian fort in the Pacific Northwest, Fort Sitka in Alaska. But growing wheat on the coast proved to be unprofitable. The Russians kept trapping more and more otter in the area that they would actually decimate the river and sea otter population in Northern California. The Russian American Company received purchase proposals from General Mariano Vallejo for $20,000, but they were quick to take John Sutter's offer of $30,000 on credit. The purchase did not include the land, as the Russians never gained legal land title from the Spanish and later Mexican government while they were in Alta California ever since the construction of Fort Ross, which began in 1812. John Sutter sent several men, including John Bidwell, to dismantle parts of Fort Ross and bring the materials and other goods here to Nueva Helvetia. A Russian schooner, which Sutter acquired as part of the purchase, made frequent trips between Fort Ross and here to move all of any movable property, especially moving structures. Keep in mind, the walls of Sutter's fort were not completed at this time. Only the central building, which is the building that I'm in right now, was finished. It's not until 1844 that the entire Sutter's fort was finished, but the materials and tools from Fort Ross helped complete the process of making this place a manufacturing center. Items that were transported here to New Helvetia from Fort Ross included the lumber to have large wooden gates, like the south gate here, which would have originally been made out of redwood. Also included, you had fruit trees that were brought here, plows, a rope machine, about 1,700 head of cattle, 940 horses, mules, and about 900 sheep. And that's not counting items for rooms. Items included tools for rooms, like tools for a cooper shop for making barrels, tools for a blacksmith shop, tools for a carpenter shop. John Sutter will get a nice fancy bed that was the same bed that belonged to the last caretaker of Fort Ross. a grist mill for grinding wheat into flour, a field artillery cannon that ended up being used during all the major battles of the Mexican-American War here in California. The original cannon was made in St. Petersburg in 1804. 70 French Charleville muskets that were originally used by Napoleon when he tried to have his army invade Russia in 1812 and was defeated. These muskets were picked up off the battlefields and were shipped to Fort Sitka and at Fort Ross. John Sutter gets 70 of these for his militia here at the fort in the case of the fort if it was attacked, which Sutter's fort never was. By the end of 1848, John Sutter still owed almost $20,000 of the $30,000 that was owed for Fort Ross. Poor weather conditions made the wheat harvest that he was supposed to be paying for Fort Ross in wheat and in flour was not going well. When John Sutter Jr. arrives here in the fall of 1848, John Sutter Sr. will transfer his land holdings over to his son, and now his son is faced with this debt. John Sutter Jr., with the help of a land agent by the name of Peter Burnett, later California's first governor, will help sell property in the newly established Sacramento City along the waterfront, and also selling sections of the fort will make that money to pay off the Russian debt. According to Burnett's memoirs, along with items that I had found in the John Sutter Jr. collection at the California State Library, show that the Russian debt was paid, a debt of $19,788, and detailed receipts show how that money was obtained. That money was given to a man by the name of William M. Stewart. He was a representative for the Russian-American Company. However, company records claimed the payment was never received.